But we got one from Dr. Thomas Daniel, who was a person who taught TB at Case when I was in class. He got very excited by this, told us that when the letter arrived, he trashed his plans for his class and used the letter as a problem for them to work on. That didn't make me feel particularly good, but that's all right. And then he told us that he'd be very interested in working with us, that he would be glad to do that. And that began a working relationship done by mail. Airmail, usually, it worked reasonably quickly. So Ron and I then were designing how we were going to do this. We needed to put together an algorithm for a volunteer, someone who's a history and English major. Here's what you start with, and then depending on the result of that, you do X, Y, or Z. So it was kind of a flow chart, an algorithm flow chart. We said, then you're going to skin test everybody that you can find, and then you're going to wait and see whether the skin test is positive or negative. If it's negative, you give them a vaccine. If it's positive, then you need to look for symptoms, and you need to take a history and collect a sputum sample if they're producing it. And then it went on from there, what to do if the sputum sample is positive, how to begin treatment, what drug to use, et cetera, et cetera. So that algorithm was in place, and Tom Daniel approved it and improved it a little bit, and then approved it, told us that should work.
Are you telling me that the Peace Corps instituted a program and didn't have the epidemiology figured out and the treatment protocols?
Yes, they had a consultant who was putting this together, and he asked us to work with him. So it was Dave Danielson, and we were working with Dave, but we learned that we were pretty much on our own. So the Peace Corps thought they had it, and eventually they did, because we created it for them.
And he was not a physician, and he was an epidemiologist.
Yeah, he had a master's degree in public health, right? He was a former Peace Corps volunteer in Africa. So he was very experienced with the Peace Corps. And he knew his stuff, and he helped. But he didn't have this worked out ahead of time. Then we needed to get a medical record in place. So how do you create a medical record in the boonies with people who've never used medical records before? So we decided on cards. I don't know, what are they, 5x6 or something, those cards. And we set it up so that there was an edge marking system. There were also places where you could record results of x-rays. We didn't have x-ray available, but we knew the ministry had a portable x-ray unit and would occasionally make it available to us, so we had to have provisions for that. And we had other information, age, race, sex, where they lived, all that stuff, done with a little bit of writing in, but also just making dashes on the side. So you could stack these things, and you could begin to group them by symptom or by result or whatever you wanted to do. So there were two then, one for people who were skin tested and got vaccinated and were fine, and then others where they needed more investigation became a true medical record. That meant when Ron and I made our rounds in the Yungas, we would review records. The volunteers would know we were coming. Generally, we had a reasonably regular schedule.
Patients broke into two groups: those who tested negative that got vaccinated, and those who tested positive who got treated. Those were the two tracks.
Well, those who had tested positive weren't necessarily treated, depending on their circumstances. If they were active cases, they got one kind of drug. If they were not active cases, they got another kind
Okay,
of drug.
all right.
Yeah.
Got it.
But yes,
So it's 1 and then 2.
yeah,
All right.
roughly half and half the population, about half the population tested positive. Yeah,
Can you believe that?
yeah, it was amazing. Well, they also, of course, would have people who didn't fit protocol. For example, they'd have somebody who had symptoms, they couldn't find the tubercle bacillus. We weren't going to treat them for active disease unless the volunteer could prove it, either by sputum sample or X-ray, which I almost never had access to. And so the question was, what do you do with people like that? So those sorts of questions then would be saved for when Ron and I showed up. So we'd review the records, talk to the volunteer. If the patient was available, we would see them and then make a decision based on our gut feeling. And as you might imagine, the general tendency we had was to treat. You know, even if somebody was symptomatic and we couldn't get sputum, in that environment with a drug that was cheap, 1 pill a day, with minimal side effects, we'd treat. Yeah. And that's the way the program went. It worked really very well for us. The volunteers, well, Tom Daniels then was distant, right? We were working with him through airmail letters. And